Mellisa, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast. I am so thrilled to sit down with you today and to hear the entire story of how Spread'em Kitchen came to be. I was saying to you off the recording that I had posted something on LinkedIn saying I'm recording season 9. I'm looking for epic Canadian entrepreneurs to speak with, and somebody from your team reached out, and then I started diving into all that you've created in the last 5 or 7 years, and I'm just really pumped to go into the journey. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
So let's go back 10 years or so, 12 years. I don't know what the timeline is, but I believe you were working at a Whole Foods market in Vancouver. Is that correct?
Yeah, I used to work in the produce department there, stacking vegetables and things like that. It was the first one to open here, and I just love vegetables. So I was like, okay, this will be a cool job. They're like a mission purpose driven company. I kind of wanted to work for a place like that. And I thought that, I would just work there forever, but I didn't.
In those days, you were obviously exposed to all of these really cool natural health food products. Did you ever have this moment of being like, one day I'm going to have my own product on the shelf?
I don't think it was quite like that. I'd always had this idea that I always had ideas about business. Like I would sew mittens, or I'd have an air plant store, or I just had all these ideas. I never thought I would actually follow through with anything, but I've always also been very interested in natural food products, even though I grew up in the smallest town in Ontario with only an IGA, and there were absolutely no natural products at all there. But a family had moved from Toronto to my town, and they were hippies to the max. They ate blue corn chips, which I'd never seen before. They put their I was bringing my lunch to school in Ziploc bags, and they had Tupperware that was metal, and I was like, who are these people? And I went over their house a couple times and tried amaranth soup and veganese and stuff like that, and I was hooked. And as soon as they took me to the Big Carrot, it was the first health food store I'd ever gone to. I was like, the smell of it, just everything in there. I was like, I connected to that. And so I'd always sort of carried that with me. And I think being at Whole Foods, and it kind of brought everything together when I was working there, where it was customer always first, and they always had their mission and values stated on the wall, and what is a company structure and how do you do that, and then of course all the interesting packaging. And so I think, yeah, it definitely got my creative juices sort of flowing.
I know it is such an inspiring story. I always used to love spending time in there, and I used to go there for a lot of work events, and there is something about it that's kind of just motivating. So you were working at Whole Foods, you started to sense that oh, maybe there's something here, but obviously you didn't start Spread'em Kitchen right away. What happened in those years after you finished working at Whole Foods? Were you working in another career path? What were you up to?
After I left Whole Foods, I decided that I wanted to do more than work at a grocery store. So I took a graphic design course while I was still working at Whole Foods. So I'd work at Whole Foods from 5 a.m. until 2, and then I took this graphic design course from about 2:30 until 6 o'clock. And then after that was over, I decided to just try to give it a go on my own, doing web design and maybe logo design for smaller businesses around town. And I mean, that was going pretty good. I was starting to make an okay income, enough to sort of pay my bills and stuff and start building. But the thing I really noticed is that people didn't really want the level of creativity and the level of design that I could offer. The things that I was inspired by were really innovative, clean, stuff that you see on Pinterest, big professional Behance things. But the people around here, they just wanted cat logos, and they wanted me to stretch their photo, and they didn't want cool type. They didn't want anything as creative as I wanted to do. So I just kind of got fed up in a way, where I was like, oh, I'm not reaching my full potential. What do I do? And I still didn't have enough money just to I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought, okay, I'll make these dips because people love them. I've always been excited about healthy food, and I will save up the money and go on a trip to South America. And I've always been into intuition, and I've always gotten messages in a way from the universe that kind of help guide me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and do this. and I'm going to get a lightning strike moment that's going to tell me where I'm supposed to be right now, because it feels like I'm pushing too much. And then I just signed up for the farmer's market, and that was sort of the beginning.
Okay. Wow. Before we get there, I'm so curious. So you got this light bulb moment to start making the dips. Where did that come from? Like, did you have like a cookbook that had these dips and you were inspired to there? Were you like out and about and you tried them? How did you land on the concept of dips? And how did you know that that was going to be the business?
Um, well, I've always loved dips. Okay, so when I was a kid, I started working when I was like 8 years old. So I had this paper route delivering the Georgina Advocate. And whenever I'd get my paycheck, wasn't very big, like $63, I'd go up to the Max Milk and I would get a bag of Lay's chips and a Philadelphia, because that was the most premium dip you could get at the time, the onion one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would sort of sit in front of the TV. We didn't have remote control or cable, so I would just use my foot and change the channels between the three channels we would get, and I'd eat these chips and dip. And it began to be this comfort thing. And then from there, I ended up, changing the way I eat, because I started learning more about healthy foods and things. And I'm like, oh, I want these same indulgences with the same comfort and, that good feeling, but I want them to be healthy. So I just started learning about raw food. I had that hippie
Mm,
family that moved in. So they were
yep.
teaching me sort of unintentionally about all these unique ingredients and the health properties of them, and how to eat for health, but doesn't mean that it's not going to be tasty. And so that was huge. And so I took those two concepts and I sort of like they were just how I lived my life. So I would be combining things, and being a dip lover, I would baba ganoush, or,
Mm,
hummus was delicious, but I'd always wanted to like make it cool. So I'd like make a Thai flavored one, or I'd always kind of done that naturally. And I took a trip to Australia because I'd had a little bit of a moment before as well. And so I went to Australia for about 4 months, and I came across a cashew beet pesto that they had there. And also I noticed in Australia, they kind of put beets on everything. And I was like, whoa. And I got addicted to this particular beet dip that they had there. It was like kind of chunky, and
yeah.
that wasn't happening here. And I was like, why is everything here so roasted red pepper and onion, caramelized onion, everything, And I thought, oh, this is something I could make. So I started making this beet dip at home at parties, and people were like floored by it. They were like, I've never seen anything as beautiful as this or as tasty as this. And that's when I was like, ooh, I have something kind of creative that I can offer. But I never thought of it on a big scale. So still at this point, I was still very like, oh, this is this small thing that I can do and contribute and make people happy in a small way. But I still never thought about this is a big idea or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Seems like you were definitely getting that early validation. Like you said, you were bringing it to parties and your friends were like, oh my God, this is good. So you already had that like micro proof of concept that probably made you believe like there is something here. But yeah, I can totally like see how you think, well, yeah, I'll sell it at the farmers markets, but maybe you never imagine it having, the success and magnitude that it has. So let's start kind of like what you did to actually start selling the dip. So you mentioned farmers market. So once you had that proof of concept, your friends are all raving about it. Did you just think, okay, I'm going to like sign up for the local farmers market and start selling it? Like, is that all you did to get the product out to the world?
Yeah. And because I had that graphic design background and I'd always wanted to do like the most beautiful things for people, I thought this is a great opportunity for me to do what I always wanted to do for other people, but for myself. So
Hmm.
I kind of treated it as if it was a big business already, just because if anything, I could use this for my graphic design portfolio. So I made this really epic, beautiful website. I put a lot of thought into the content and like the messaging, and I used what I learned at Whole Foods about creating a mission and a vision, and like kind of going through the pillars of the business, more so as just a role play. Like I wasn't being that serious about it. And I sort of made these nice labels. And though I didn't have a lot of money, so I got the square ones, and we all had to sit around the table cutting them out into circles, because I was still kind of like, oh, I don't know. I only had $500. Like I literally had like no money to spend on this either. So I kind of had to keep it
Hmm.
thrifty. And then, yeah, I just sort of started selling at the market. And then after my first farmer's market, we sold out in about 2 hours,
Whoa.
and people were floored, but not just because it was unique, but mostly I realized that there was a market of people who really were doing without or compromising a lot because of maybe they've been through a significant health event, like, or that they have an allergy or something like that. And generally in the past, and I still think now, things like that aren't food isn't created for those people intentionally. They kind of try to take what they have and then adapt it to that. But what I was
Yeah.
making, the pure recipes were made that way with those ingredients. And it always put a high value on ingredients. Like I don't eat canola oil or sunflower oil or grapeseed oil. I only eat extra virgin cold pressed olive oil. So that's all I put in my products because I know it makes a difference. I don't use sugar or like, that stuff I take really seriously for me. And I think because I treated the product as if I was making it for myself or my friends at my party. And that stayed true throughout, that people could taste it. And the flavors were so intense and so clean that people had never tasted such powerful flavor and with such great ingredients that also didn't leave a weird aftertaste or leave them feeling bad after they ate an entire tub. Because that was
Yeah.
another thing. People are like, I can't not eat this whole thing, but I never feel terrible after I eat it. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. And I think what's really cool about your story is that you were able to merge a lot of your passions. Like you're kind of passionate about food, healthier options. You had this great vision and kind of background with design. And it's almost like the perfect like crux of all of those things came together to launch Spread'em Kitchen. So I think it's cool that, you didn't just discount your past experience. Like every step of the way seems to have led you to launching this company, which I find really interesting. So from the farmer's market, you sell out, you're getting great proof of concept. What happens from there? Like, how do you go from I just sell a product at a farmer's market to I'm actually building a business and want to sell it in stores? What did those next few steps look like for you?
I think it's still at this point was driven by my customers or the people because I still didn't have that much confidence. And I think that is something that has been lacking my whole life is
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure if I was doing the right thing or I didn't really know. So yeah, after the farmer's market, people were like, hey, meet me in the Starbucks parking lot. I need 20, 30 of these. I'm afraid I'll never see you again. It's the language people were using. I want to freeze it. More beautiful than that, people were they were so excited. They were sharing it. They were buying 30 to share. It wasn't for them, all of it. They were like 15 of those they were giving away to people. And they would come back to me with recipe. Oh my God, have you had the beet dip with on a piece of sourdough bread with freshly sliced cucumber and a little bit of rosemary salt? I'm like, no,
I love that.
and then the person next to them would hear that recipe and they go, oh, have you tried it stirred into pasta with this and that? And I was like, it was them. It really wasn't me. So I was like, I felt a duty and an obligation to figure it out. So I just went on the internet and I was like, okay, how do I get a barcode? I went into a couple of local shops and I said, what do I have to do to sell this dip here? And I went to like mom and pop shops because they seem like I shop at those places. So I know that they
Yeah.
have stuff on there that doesn't have a barcode. So there must be a way to kind of do it. I ended up just going on the internet and incorporating my business and then getting the barcodes. And I went around on my bike because I still didn't have a car at the time. And I made these cute little bags up that had the couple dips in there. I had some veggie straws and a little card. And I went to talk to all the managers I could find. And I think 5 out of the 6 I went to, it was an immediate yes. And I was selling like 2 weeks later or so in some of those stores. So I ended up in the beginning too, I was actually making at my house. So I had to get a commissary kitchen. So I had one table, paying $500 for a space, and then we kind of moved up from there. But yeah, it was really all driven by the people. And then the next thing that happened was more and more stores wanted it because more customers wanted it. And then I got the fire. I was like, looked at it as this sort of challenge, like, how many stores could I get it in? What do I have to do? So I would just kind of go to, all the larger stores around here, like Choices and Nature's Fair, and drop off product. And that's kind of I just kind of learned as I went, really.
What do you think was kind of the catalyst to these store managers saying yes to you? Like, was it that they tried the product? Did you have a fancy PDF document that you were showing them about all the health benefits? Was it that you were like super personable? Like, can you pinpoint? Because it sounds like you kind of showed up just being like, hi, I have a product. Like you didn't have it all together per se. So why do you think they said yes?
I think 100% it was the taste. It's honestly hands down the tastiest thing most people say they have ever tried ever. And even if they don't like it at first, because it is a little bit sour or a little bit at the beginning, but they find that their bodies after they're like, oh, I kind of want more of that. Like I thought it was a little bit sharp, but wait, no, I want more. And then they just devour it and they're kind of shocked at themselves. And I think the second thing was definitely my personality. Like I was on a mission, on a friendly mission to find the people that I needed to find and tell them about what I was doing and why it was important and why the other stuff needed an upgrade. And I think they saw that too, just even in grocery. Probably hummus was sort of declining, it was sort of boring. There's only so many toppings you can put on a hummus to try to make it interesting, and cashews and this whole plant-based movement wasn't quite a thing just yet, and cashews and vegan cheese wasn't quite a thing just yet. So I think they kind of knew that something was going to happen, and this was maybe the beginning of a new product category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like what you say too, like the product itself was really, really good. It's not like you were trying to promote a product that sucked. Like the product spoke for itself. And then obviously a few layers on top of that helped it to maybe get into those first few stores, but no amount of marketing can sell a bad product. Right. So, okay, let's then talk about you're starting to get into more stores. You're obviously getting busier and busier. Do you hire help? Like, are you still a one-person show at this point? Like, when did you get to that point where you're like, oh my God, like I can't do this alone anymore?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like my probably was in around 50 stores,
Whoa.
and
That's a lot.
I was still doing it out of a Vitamix, which was like two at a time kind of the thing, and it was still hand filling stuff. And I had had a couple people come in here and there that I'd kind of paid as casual help to kind of help me, but they kept quitting. And I think it was like the hand filling, because like it was really awful. And a couple of times I was crying. I was like, why am I doing this? This is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And then my husband was like, there's probably equipment for that. And I got just so worried because, most of my life I have lived in poverty. Like my mom was a single mom, struggled with addictions. Like I was the ruler of the house kind of thing. Like I had to learn on a very small budget how to make things work and how to do something with nothing. Like if I wanted a longboard, I had to learn how to make it. I didn't have the money to buy it. So I just, and there were times in my life where I had a student loan. They garnished my wages because I couldn't pay. I was working always these minimum wage style jobs, working like 2 or 3 jobs. I wasn't trying to cheat the system. There's just stuff is expensive, and I could
Yeah.
barely buy contacts sometimes. So I was just afraid to spend
Yeah.
money because I was like, well, what if no one ever buys Spread'em again? Or like, what if I'm making a bad decision because I've never really had money? So maybe this isn't the right thing to do? And so I finally did just take a risk. I think it was like the $3,000 I had saved from everything, and I just put it into my first filling machine, and then I used another $20,000 to buy a giant blender, and that kind of like
Whoa.
drained all my savings at that point, and I couldn't really afford to hire anyone just yet. So I still kind of kept working, tweaking the recipes and making sure that I could get it around the clock. Like I'd be working until like 3 a.m. and then back at 5 a.m. kind of things. Like I really put in a lot of effort. And then I got one full-time employee that kind of helped. And once I had the filling machine, it was easier to kind of keep people because I realized that people don't have a highest threshold for pain like I do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's kind of how it went.
I can totally like, I'm just picturing like you at like 2 a.m. crying, like the employee being like, what is wrong with this person? And being like,
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you wrote down like your vision and your mission because you were inspired by how Whole Foods did it. And obviously to persevere when you are working around the clock and when you feel like maybe nothing's working, you have to have a strong why. Like obviously, that's what's going to keep you going and you're going to wake up the next day and not shut the whole business down. What is your why with Spread'em Kitchen? Like, what is the mission behind the company that kept you going even on those dark early days when it would have been easier to quit?
I think I have like 3 and they're at different levels. So I have like my big picture why, which my big picture why is definitely I'm a crusader for real food. I think processed food is destroying humanity. I feel really passionate about it. I think we're dumbing ourselves down by succumbing to the convenience of processed food. And I think we all are like stunting our true potential and happiness and health and well-being because how accessible processed food is, how unregulated processed food is. It's pure poison, I think. And I grew up on processed food and I was very sick for a long time because of it. And it's my mission that, food is information, it's instructions. You can either upregulate or downregulate yourself based on what you put in your body. It's so important. And I don't think people truly understand how important it is because our taste buds have been hijacked by processed food. And so that's like my big mission. I just want to kick the asses of like these huge companies that are just making so much money because they don't care about people. Even like now I'm kind of in this vegan cheese game and like it's poison. Most of it is poison. Like, do not eat that stuff, but like the stuff
Yeah.
that we make isn't. But you're not going to get like a melty cheese at this point. And then so people are just used to certain things, right?
Yeah.
And so they kind of want a direct change, but until you start actually eating healthy, you will realize that you don't need an exact replica or whatever for your
Yeah.
processed food addiction. You're
No.
better off without it. So that's kind of like my big mission. And then in between, it was more like the game, I guess. I'm hyper competitive. I always have been. And so it was kind of like just writing down, can I get to $100,000? And can I
Mm.
meet this person? Like, who's the gatekeeper for certain things was like on there. And then revenue kind of like goal setting sort of things were sort of the other things. And then also always keeping in mind how I wanted to build my business. So I didn't know B Corp wasn't really a big term when I was starting my business, but it definitely aligns with the kinds of pillars I wanted to instill in what we do every day, which is like paying a livable wage, making sure that, we always talk about taking care of our communities, but understanding that our communities, because of how global everything is, extend to where I get my cashews from. Are those people being paid well? Do they have a good life too? Like, are my employees taken care of? Like, do they feel not too stressed? Do they like coming to work? Like, I want to make sure that the impact I have, every person I meet, do they feel like they're special and number one? And like, I'm engaged with the conversation. It's not just about selling, it's about maybe every person you meet along the way is part of a bigger picture for you. And so I try to like look at every interaction as that and not just about building the business. It's kind of more like it's like a personal journey I feel like I'm on. And I guess that's how
Yeah.
I've kind of structured the path is like some people are way ahead of me and some people are just starting and just
Yeah.
trying to not get too stuck because I am competitive in like where are we, it's like, well, where are we as an organization, not just
Yeah.
money or that sort of thing.
Oh, so inspiring. I love those 3 pillars of your mission. All of them so important and so powerful. And I can just hear in how you share them that like this lights you up. So very, very cool. So fast forwarding a little bit, like what is your role in Spread'em Kitchen today? And like, what does the team look like at this point?
It's still pretty small, I would say. So we've got about 10 people in production, a production manager and sort of that sort of thing. And then we've got a marketing person and we have a sort of local sales general manager. And then we have me who kind of like, I'm not really in the role I want to be in, but I'm kind of transitioning into that role probably
Cool.
in the next couple of months or so, which is more the creative stuff. So right now I'm just kind of like filling holes. I do some sales things. I do lots of spreadsheets, and I do lots of admin stuff. So that's not really the stuff that gets me excited about Spreadum, and I'm very happy to start to organize it and kind of get that off my plate. And then we have a broker, so they kind of help with, cross Canada sales, and then we've hired someone in the US to kind of help us with our expansion over there. We're not quite there yet, but we're just kind of like building the swell and the program. My favorite things to do are strategy. I really love problem solving strategy. I like analyzing data to figure out patterns, and to try to, I don't know, create better experiences for everybody in the value chain, like for our distributors, for our direct customers, for our retailers, for my employees. And then I just love being creative. So obviously coming up with new flavors and new products, but also just like other things, just like anything marketing, kind of how to tell the story is kind of like what I really like.
I love how you're like super interested in strategy, numbers, and then like also the creative and design. I see those almost as like two different sides of your brain, but it's cool that like you do have talents in many areas that you're able to utilize in your role. But yeah, when you say like the numbers and strategy stuff, I'm like, oh, I would just rather hang out in the creative world, but it's awesome that you have a variety of skill sets.
Yeah, I think that is something interesting about my personality type, that not a lot of people like have that, or like understand why I even like that. But I think at the end of the day, I just like solving problems. So sometimes you have to do
Yes.
it with numbers and sometimes you don't. And I understand that sort of math is the language of the universe. So when you start
Yes.
understanding numbers, and you can follow patterns, it really opens the doors to the creativity.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point, that at the root of both of those things, it's creative problem solving, or just analytical problem solving. So
Mhm.
definitely. Okay, where's the product line at today? Can you give the listener a bit of an overview of like what you sell currently, and just like the expansion that you guys have had in terms of product SKUs over the last few years?
We have so many SKUs, probably too many. But we have a line of dips, cashew dips. So that would be like beet, carrot, cilantro. They're just your regular dips. Then we have our creamy party dips, which is where you get into the cultured sort of cashew base, and that's like tzatziki's and spinach dips and kind of that nostalgic stuff that you
Yeah.
kind of might like a substitute for.
Yep.
And then we get into our kind of cream cheeses, our creamy spreads, dips, sort of things, which is our number one seller, which is chive and garlic and
Mm.
jalapeno. And then we last year, or no, beginning of COVID, I don't know, the last couple of years, a bit of a blur. We launched more of a firm, creamy block, for like more like charcuterie, and kind of like a little bit more sliceable. And then we have a butter, and we're just launching our snack packs. So a lot of people like to take our stuff on the go, and so we've teamed up with a local gluten-free cracker producer here in Vancouver
Oh,
called Free Yum, and her crackers are amazing, really nice and crisp and delicious. And so we've kind of put them in a to-go thing to help drive trial, because our stuff is kind of expensive. So it's sort of like a
yeah.
low cost way to try the product on the go, but also just as a way to kind of get into another spot in the store.
I love the idea of the snack pack. That's such a cool collaboration, and that you're able to do it with another local company. And I know those crackers. So yeah, if I saw that, like I would be totally munching on that on a commute, or I don't know, anytime I have to go somewhere and I know I'm going to be hungry. So very cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we're out and about. I noticed this a lot when I was really deep in the hustle of like sales and demos, and I was like doing 2 demos a day, and I was just driving all around.
Yes.
And I'm very cognizant of what I put in my body. And a lot of times I would have to compromise on something I didn't think was that great because of time.
Yep.
So I would be end up eating something I didn't necessarily 100% want to eat, but I was hungry, and I was in that place of like, I just need something, and maybe it's better than a cookie, or maybe I would eat a cookie. So I also feel like this is as people start to build awareness about it, is something that is something you can have as a snack, and it's sort of your savior at 7-Eleven, where there's this sea of bad choices and you're like, if only there was one good choice. And now I feel like there is going to be one good choice.
Are you saying these are going to be available at 7-Eleven one day?
Oh yeah, very, I think they might be, yeah.
Epic. I cannot wait for that. um, is there a milestone that you guys have reached in the last like 2 to 3 years that you feel particularly proud of? Obviously, you've had a lot of success in scaling to retailers and creating this beautiful brand and just being on your own personal journey. But is there something in particular that jumps out at you that you're like, I am so proud that our company did this or that I did this?
Yeah, I mean, there's about two that really sort of stick out to me. And one is being able to pay all of my employees a livable wage here in Vancouver. I mean, I started paying people like 12 bucks an hour, which was more than minimum wage, but it's always been on my goal list to kind of be able to pay people more. And I hope to go beyond the livable wage thing where I really want to nurture our employees and get like, people living a really great life, like not just being in a job, because I work so many jobs where like my job takes up all my time and energy. And when I get home, I just want to lay down in my bed for a little while. And I don't really have any time to like explore my passions or have time for my family or whatever it is. And so one of my missions, personal mission, is to create an environment here that allows for people to explore the things that they love to do and without the stress of money. So that's kind of one thing. I don't quite know what that's going to look like just yet, but I pick away at it in the ways that I can with the means that I have to do so as we go.
Yes. Yeah.
Moving into our own very own production space was huge. I mean, I stayed in a
Mm.
commissary. We were well over $1 million in revenue, and I was still in a commissary. Like I
Whoa.
was basically, and the commissary didn't even have like proper, like a door was a narrow door. It couldn't even fit a pallet in there. And we were probably packing 6 pallets or more a week per distributor. And so we would have to hand bomb it out, and we were using like ratchet straps to kind of stack them to the ceiling. And I was just afraid because I also have never really owned anything or been responsible for a full lease or something like that. And so that was a real personal development milestone. It's like really realizing that I have a real business here. It's like
Mm-hmm.
successful. You're not like, don't worry. Like I remember bankers, like whenever they want to give me money, like nobody has that experience. People are like are always complimenting me
Yeah.
on how good my P&L is and stuff. And I was like, I have no idea what P&L is, like for so long, I was like, okay, good. But mostly it was like, how can I get as much for spending as little as I possibly can, except for the things that matter to me, which were people and ingredients. So when we finally got our own space, I was like, kind of felt like one of those moments where if nothing changes from this point on, I think I will be able to say that I did something,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty proud of that position I put myself in, taking myself out of, like not being able to afford contacts to be
Yeah.
able to be providing salaries for people and to be providing an awesome product to people and figuring it out as I go. I don't think I gave myself enough credit for
Yeah.
the strategy and the stuff that I came up with on my own, whereas like a lot of people do get outside help. But I'd had a couple of mentor type relationships, but they always end up sort of firing me because they were just like, you have such a strong vision. Honestly, you have all the tools you need. You just need time. They really did say
Yeah.
that. Like, if you need to call me. But I honestly feel like you have this. And at first, I was sort of offended at the two people that kind of gave me very similar feedback. I was like,
Yeah.
is this what a mentor, like, oh my God, like I felt bummed out because I wanted someone to tell me the answers. But one of the guiding principles I keep getting hammered on the head through the universe is trust yourself. Like, honestly,
Mhm.
you know the answer. Stop doubting yourself and wasting time asking 50 million people and maybe paying them money to then realize that your idea was it. So I think those are sort of the keys.
Oh man, that is definitely a powerful lesson, is that at the end of the day, like only you have the answers. Like you are the visionary behind this company, and it's easy to want to outsource that and be like, somebody else needs to tell me what to do, or I just need to take one more program and learn how to do Facebook ads. But it's like, no, what do I know to be true about what this business needs? And I think it's really like a journey to learn to listen to that inner voice and to realize that, like, if you follow someone else's template, it probably won't work that well because you're completely pushing aside what you know to be true about this company that you built from the ground up. So I was going to ask you, like, have you ever worked with like outside mentors? But I think that kind of answers that. And it sounds like at this point, you know, that like usually it's more of a, I need to sit and ask myself, what does the business need?
Yeah, exactly. I am actually going to be working with two other people though, coming in the coming months that have sort of um, decided to take on Spread'em as a project
Cool.
as a like a round table. Like I think that we have reached a point where I need a little bit more strategy back and forth and a little
Yeah.
bit more tactical back and forth. And but now that I know that specific thing, it feels like the right move to make. Whereas before I was like either hiring like a freelance marketing
Yeah.
agency or this and that. And that the to tell me my vision basically is what I kept doing. But
Interesting.
I know my vision. So but I didn't trust it. But now I do. So I guess I had to go through that, I guess. I feel
Absolutely.
like there's no sense in sometimes looking back at hindsight and you know, you might beat yourself up over it. You're like, oh, why did I do this? Why did I do this? But I think that message is that you everything has value. So even if you look back and you're like, oh, this was the same lesson over and over again, but it just took you that long to finally understand the value in that message. And now that you went through it 3 or 4 times, you know, then now you kind of don't have to do it again because you recognize it. I read this really awesome book called The Mountain Is You. I am the mountain is you.
Hmm.
And basically, it's about self mastery or whatever, but it's also a little bit about self sabotage in some ways, like little things that can come up that you might not realize that you're doing, like uprooting or you know perfectionism or these sorts of things that are really just a means of delaying your inner voice or discounting
Yes.
your inner voice instead of just like you know, if it doesn't hurt, if there is no pain, you just have to realize that that means you're on the right track. Like that means you're learning. And I think we all want to avoid pain and we all, but really there's no other way. There are no shortcuts, you know, so.
Some people say that like business or your business growth journey is directly tied to your personal growth journey. Does that kind of resonate with your path? Like, have you had to do a lot of personal work and really grow as a individual in order for your company to continue growing?
Oh, I think absolutely 100%. If you're not on a path of personal development in business, I don't think you probably just have like a regular business that's a transactional business, but people who really grow their businesses into these huge things, empires, if you will, it is 100% tied to who you are and how you grow and how you develop. And,
Yeah.
you know, all the problems that come up are generally related to, you know, you. So your personal blocks or those sorts of things, that's 100%. I agree with that statement.
Mhm. Is there a skill that you're currently working on yourself? Like I know you said you're kind of reaching out to other people to help you to like strategize for the future, but you personally, is there an area that you feel like you really want to dive into or something that you haven't fully grasped yet that you want to just learn more about as an entrepreneur and as the founder of this company?
Yeah, I think me. I think I'm really getting into the term self mastery, you know,
Yeah.
really starting to understand who I am and discipline and the way that I go out into the world and being okay with nothingness and everything all at the same time and more focusing on a human experience and less about material things or
Mm.
any of that sort of thing. You know, I think I've always been very interested in the meaning of life. I don't want to get maybe too deep or whatever,
I
but you know,
love
I
it.
came from a situation where I was in foster care from the time I was 3 until I was about 6.5 years old. And I kind of bounced around between my mom and foster care back and forth. And I had a moment when I was about 5 years old in a foster home and I kind of was crying. And I remember not understanding like why am I here? Like, why do I exist? Like, it doesn't feel like anybody wants me. Like, what is my purpose? I remember being like so young and asking, what's my purpose? And I stood up on my bed frame and I looked out and there was a full moon. And I said to the moon, like, I'll be good. Is that, is that why nobody really wants me? Is it because I'm not good? Maybe I'm a bad kid, and I made a promise to the moon that night that I will do whatever it takes to be good. And I really, from that moment on, at such a young age, I wanted to know the meaning of life. And I think through chaos and through crisis, sometimes, that stuff like that doesn't usually happen until you're maybe a teenager, or maybe you're 40, like where something, your life comes crashing down on you. And I think in a way I was always sort of sad, but that was like an opportunity for me at such a young age to really become aware of my
Mhm.
experiences and interpret them. And I've always kind of like had these interesting books pop up in my life. Like the first one was like the Celestian Prophecy, and
Oh
then
yeah.
another one was this one on nature versus nurture, and just sort of like following those types of sort of, there are no coincidences in life is one of the main things that I've been led by since I was really, really young. And being open to whatever journey you happen to be on, that it's about the messages that you receive between your engagements with the different people that you meet, whether they sometimes are conflict, sometimes they're like you've met someone for the first time that feels like you've known them for an eternity. Sometimes somebody gives you a tip, and sometimes you give, something, and you change people's lives. And I think I love that. It makes me feel excited about the magic of life, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I have everything I need. I finally got the MacBook Air I ever wanted. I bought my family a home last year, like in Vancouver. Like that's insane. And
Wow.
so I've kind of done these things. And the thing that still kind of makes me feel like magic is helping people and sort of like uncovering this sort of magic of life. So my own self mastery or discovery is kind of maybe going down more of that. I don't want to call it spiritual, but just understanding
Mhm.
consciousness and all that stuff.
I feel like maybe there's like a future project in that for you to be like, once you learn this and actualize it, to teach it to others. So who knows? Put it on the
That
vision
would be
board.
cool. If I could be like the next Joe Dispenza,
There
I
you
would be
go.
like, that would
It's
be insane.
possible. I actually do see it for you, so I don't know that it's too far off. Final question for somebody who's listening to this podcast and they're feeling particularly inspired by your story, but they have no idea where to begin with their business idea. What would you tell them is one of the first steps that they could take to bring an idea to life, just like you did?
I would say don't get too hung up on like competition or like, anything like that. Make sure that you have something of value. So don't cheap out on anything that you make sure if it's a food product that it's something that it's like the best ingredients, or that you're going to be making people's lives better, not just selling cookies or something like that. Or if it's sort of a service or something like that, yeah, don't get hung up on competition, but really trying to tailor it
Mm,
specifically to the one person that you think could really benefit from that. Just the one. Don't try to like make it too big of a group, just one
mhm.
person, because there'll obviously be more people to follow. The next thing I say
Yeah.
is branding is huge.
Mm,
And like the way it looks is huge. And so I would say, with Pinterest being basically so readily available, create a Pinterest board, which is basically a
yep.
vision board. And it's so amazing and so powerful. And just like go to town on that. And it's not done in a day. Like you gotta like start pinning things over a month or whatever, and
Yes.
make a really just one big board. Don't try to like organize it, just everything you like or catches your eye, from like a building to a font to a color scheme or something like that. Just dump it all into that thing, and then go through there. And this is like where my pattern and my sort of strategy brain comes in, and start creating different boards from the commonalities that you see in there. And then from
Cool.
each of those boards, go inside and start saying, okay, is this like a personal thing, or is this kind of like is this just like like a personal need, or is this something that relates to my business? And then kind of sort that out between like personal life goals and then like your business like look and vision and branding from there. Because sometimes people, I kind of am like this too, where I just like I get them mixed up sometimes. And then
Same.
as your business grows, you have to realize that like your business is a certain aesthetic, and your life aesthetic can change over time, but you got to be
Yep.
pretty consistent with your business aesthetic. And so
True.
I would say like aesthetic is huge, because most of the time people who have a product or a service, if their website looks kind of janky, people aren't going to trust that it's pro or that you're better than them. That's where I think the major customer barrier is that deep down, the customer has to believe or be told that you know more than they do, or
Hmm.
that you have what they don't have and need.
Yeah.
So if your food product or your website or your packaging just looks like, a printed sticker out of a printer,
Hmm.
you really do have to kind of level it up. Like, what would craft do? Or like,
Yeah.
what would somebody you aspire in a service would do to kind of do that? And I would say if you can get those two things clear,
Yeah.
um, really just pounding the pavement. That's another thing, actually. So many
Hmm.
people try to skip this step. They try to hire it out. They don't want to meet anybody, or they just kind of like want it all right away. They want mass distribution, or they want 10,000, I don't know if that's a lot, 100,000 customers, or something like that. But all the value in the early days comes from you doing everything. It really does, because
Yeah.
that's how you learn how to, first of all, hold people accountable who are going to then be in that position, whether that be sales or production or writing code or your Facebook ads or whatever. But then
Yep.
you're also getting the feedback from customers. So for like me, I was doing demos so I could use their language. Like, I have my language of like what I'm telling them the product is, but what are they telling you that the product is to them?
Yeah.
Listen to that, and then, so that's like such valuable information. Other people aren't going to know that. You're not going to pick up on those cues if you're not there. Like, those are really special moments. And then I think too, when I was going to the stores myself, or trying to get the sales meetings, and them getting to know me and my hustle and my grit and my,
Yes.
tenacity for success, I think that's where the loyalty comes from. Like, we're doing so amazing here in the West, and there's lots of competition coming in all the time, and we are dominating. And it's not, our stuff is the best, I will say. But on top of it, people want to try new things. So retailers are willing to let other people in. But I think
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a certain loyalty. My retailers have certain loyalty. My distributor has a certain loyalty to me, because they all know me. They all like, feel my passion every time at a trade show. Like, we have such great relationships. Like, building those relationships are invaluable beyond what you're doing now, right? Like, you never know if the
Yeah.
person you come across in the grocery store is going to be your next boss, or your next collaborator, or pass you on a customer, or it could be anything, and you could be helping them too. So I think always just thinking those three things, like, you get so much value more than you think, and feels like it's going to be tiring to do all that,
Hmm.
but it's worth all the hours that you spend building it up kind of slow
Hmm.
to get that information, I personally think.
I love those tips. So, number one, don't cut corners, make a really good product. Number two, epic branding. Number three, pound the pavement, build the relationships. I can imagine that there's probably a lot of these retailers who still remember the first time you came in and your enthusiasm and your excitement, and they've just continued to strengthen that relationship with you since. So, I think that's such an important part of building that brand loyalty and that retailer loyalty to you. And it's obviously paid off quite well. So definitely important tidbit for anyone listening who is selling a product. It always boils down to the relationship. Somebody is behind the product, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it
Oh,
makes me excited too. Like, when I see the CEO from Choices and he gives me a hug at a trade show, and he's like reminiscing about
yeah.
spreading products, and it like lights me up. I'm like, okay, like, they care.
Yeah. It's a reminder that, like, yeah, people really do care about you. They care about your product and they believe in your brand just as you do. So
Yeah, they're like
very,
rooting for you. It's so
they're
cool,
rooting for you.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm.
This has been so cool. I absolutely love your energy, your enthusiasm for Spread'em Kitchen, and I'm very intrigued too about your personal evolution and spiritual journey. I'm sure we'll, stay connected and I can keep in touch with you on that. But if people haven't tried Spread'em Kitchen and they want to go get their hands on some products, and they live in Canada, where are the best places to find out about you, to learn more about the brand, and all the places that they can connect with you guys?
Well, we're available in almost all natural grocery stores across Canada. So from, Nature's Fair to the Big Carrot. We're also in Loblaws and superstores now too, in the sort of natural value aisle.
Yep.
We're now also available in Sobeys, which is pretty cool, in with the natural dairy sets. You can find our cream cheeses in there next to, the organic eggs and yogurts and those sorts of things. So that's really awesome. And that's coast to coast. And you can also find us online. So we did start a store online so we can ship straight to your house. And then that way you also get sort of a few little extra personal touches to kind of like learn more about the brand and, engage with us a little bit more. And then, yeah. And then all of these sort of online stores like Spud and there's so many. Just go on the store locator if you're interested.
Yeah, I will link that in the show notes for sure. And I can honestly say we had a couple friends over a few weekends ago and I made a charcuterie board and it had all of your products on it and they were obsessed. Like they're so good. They're the best replacements for, typical cheese or whatever people normally put out. So I just want to say congratulations on all your success. You have an amazing product and I wish you all the best as you continue to share your mission and your vision with more and more people. So thank you, Mellisa.
Oh, no, thank you so much for chatting.